Liberals and figures on the center-right are thoroughly wedded to the principle of absolute freedom of speech, and yet such freedom is unprecedented in history and potentially dangerous. Liberty is a right that has always been hard won by a small cadre of people whose virtues guaranteed that they would not misuse it. When it was misused, social mechanisms such as a culture of shaming and honor were employed to keep the bad actors in place, to ensure that they would not become dominant. Nothing like that exists today. People, no matter how sordid their worldview is, are allowed to speak vociferously and to spread lies without punishment. Freedom of speech in the West has been bought cheap, but in reality, it is an expensive commodity whose price is paid in measure with falsehood. When speech becomes used for falsity, to spread denials about biological truths, historical truths, or the dignity of our people, its price becomes evident, and we would be sorry to pay it. Society cannot afford this price without collapsing and becoming unstable, giving in to the leftist revolution. Today, we are in a condition of crisis. The enemies of truth are given carte blanche to speak and to act, and there is no enforcement mechanism to prevent this. Patrick Buchanan, Alex Jones, and other paleo-conservatives gloss over this fact, and they are willing to pay the fatal price, to let reality give way to falsehood under a purblind appeal to an anarchistic liberty. Liberals, like James Lindsay, too, harp on about free speech as a principle, failing to realize that what they fight against is a pernicious enemy in the battle of ideas who do not bend when they are confronted with reality. Leftists reduce everything to power, and they, unlike the center-right, are unafraid to use it to succeed. That's why they win and we lose. They have power and they apply it. In a time of emergency or war, liberties are always suspended by the state. We're in an informational war, as Alex Jones might say. Only an anarchist libertarian would object to the intervention of the state during such times, but even then, it's a description of what actually happens rather than a normative claim. What libertarians don't understand is that censorship is often voluntary and carried out on an organic basis. An organization such as the ADL will put up an article about this or that figure, and he'll be promptly banned on social media, and this all happens without the intervention of the state at all. Even in an anarcho-capitalist society, there would be an interest to censor books and materials to prevent social costs from running rampant or to prevent subversives from ruining society. The libertarians don't really have a good argument against the censorship of speech in general. Right now, we're in an informational emergency, and we need emergency power. People are being conditioned to ignore basic truths about human race, sex, history, and we're witnessing a cover-up of ethnic conflict in every Western country, whilst being also conditioned to advocate for the diversity that causes it. The outbreak of such revolutionary agitation can only be soothed by an iron fist, not by the well-intentioned but forceless words of the liberals. The traditional definition of liberty, which is the freedom that we deserve according to the level of our virtue, must intervene. Liberty today is on the side of chaos and dissolution. The liberty of the masses is collapsing nations. We do not deserve it. It's time to pull the brakes. The elite knows the importance of censorship with a view to retaining control over the democratic imperium. They, in both the private and public sphere, are collaborating to silence the right and even the truthful center. We are thus in an arms race, and if we do not adopt the tools of our enemy, we will never stand a chance of victory. Now, as I've said, arms races can and often do spiral out of control, but the consequences of a campaign of censorship are, in this instance, well worth the risks in my estimation. It's true that censorship can cause friendly fire. It can freeze the willingness of honest people to speak up and other such things. But again, we are in an emergency. It is dire. If the leftists win on information, then even as a vanguard, the right cannot win, nor can the center even prosper. When the emergency is over, censorship can always be relaxed. Even in the Soviet Union, censorship and its intensity softened some decades after the revolution, particularly under Khrushchev. Emergency power can last forever, which is a danger to be sure, but it is not a necessary fact. I believe we should be willing to accept the dangers of this position on being against free speech, because, to be honest, it's completely necessary. Censorship to prop up a Potemkin village or to give life to an artificial construction is unconscionable, but what about censorship to preserve the truth, to preserve order? There is something much less reproachable about that in my estimation. Some will say, rightly so, that censorship can backfire. The Streisand effect, in which censored material becomes more popular than it would have been if the censors hadn't called attention to it, does sometimes occur. But if the laughable and hypocritical banned books displays in universities and libraries are anything to go by, then we would be in little danger of this. In the case of deplatforming, the Streisand effect did not kick in because they censored the forum rather than the ideas themselves. If no one can speak at all, then there is no Streisand effect because that effect functions by the way of the free propagation of ideas. The right's reach, which was massive in 2018, has been reduced and ghettoized to a few small social spaces. The Streisand effect does not work for us. The elite have been successful and it didn't backfire for them. We should study this closely. All of this poses a serious question, though. Wherefore should the right be on freedom of speech in the present moment when we are shut out of power? The answer is obvious. Free speech is a strategy for revolutionaries. It has always been to the aid of the vanguard within unstable countries and within repressive regimes. We should tactically support freedom of speech for the moment, but if we were to hold some degree of power, we cannot deny the importance of shutting down leftist critical theory, critical race theory, and the gender affirmative pipeline. If our enemies were merely describing what was happening in society, then there'd be little danger. However, their theories are employed for the purpose of activism, hence the term critical theory. Shutting it down is of utmost importance if we want to win. Some conservatives, such as DeSantis, are attempting to do so to some extent, which is a positive development. If conservatives ever used their power to shut down the left's ideas, they would not have suffered as many losses. But since those efforts are constricted and rare, freedom of speech is more generally beneficial to us at the moment than it is harmful. We need the freedom to force conservatives further to the right. They might go after Drag Queen Story Hour, but then they'll go after the quote-unquote fascists as well. They'll punch right. The center-right is our enemy because it goes along with the status quo, and it always attempts to prevent the vanguard from succeeding. Free speech is necessary for us in the moment to demolish them and remove any obstacles to the dissemination of our ideas. When a time comes that the nation is stabilized and when the leftist revolution has been stamped out, then we can talk about having freedom of ideas. The free interaction of ideas is part of what made cultures like ancient Greece such a hotbed of philosophical discourse for the most part, and the value of that is to be cherished. But understand that such a state of affairs can only arise organically in a nation-state that is free from internal fracture. Free speech is expensive, and no one has an absolute right to liberty that they do not deserve.